I don't want to start here. I want to start here. Okay. Computer animation. What's up? Again, I thought I would try to do a quick version of how to do the cereal box. This is going to be breakneck speed. At least I hope to make it breakneck speed. We've covered it in lectures, and I just wanted to have a condensed version that was just one single demo to kind of get people caught up that need to get caught up. So the UV map box is an example where you're going to need to have a box, a cereal box, and I want 3 different images, and I want text on each side, and it needs to focus on a theme, any theme you want, and it looks decent. And you had some fun making it, and you're kind of demonstrating that you know how UVs work. So I'm going to start you from scratch where we just construct the box, right? So let's make a cube. So this cube right here is going to be 3 by 4 by 1, and then all divisions are set to 1. And then we're going to play with the UV mapping part of it. All right, so let's just, do I want to take a look at an example? Do I have an example right here? Right? So if you look at an example, right, this is a cool little example, a monster box. This is kind of like the end product, but we're going to do Waluigi, of course. All right, one more example. Another cool example, another cool example. So you're just really kind of introducing yourself to how a UV map works and kind of to introduce people to Photoshop that haven't done Photoshop. All right, here we go. I'm going to keep reminding myself that we're going fast. I'm going to be sounding like a broken record. So we need to create a box. Go to Create, Polygon, and hit Cube Options. And I'm going to hit Edit Reset. And now I'm going to change my width to, what did I say? 3 by 4 by 1. So width is going to be 3 by 4 by 1. All right, create. Yeah, it looks like a cereal box. Look at that. Just going to lift it up so we can see it better. Okay, now we need to arrange the UVs. So Maya exists in XYZ world. The UV is the next subsequent 3 letters, UVW. So it's like peeling this and having a second graph to look at our objects. The way we get to the UV editor is we can go here to Panel, and then Save Layouts, and then Perspective UV Editor. Let's hold that up there for a second so you can find it. Panels, Save Layout, Perspective UV Editor. Go ahead and click on it. And when I click on my box, I have this thing that looks like an upside down T. And each one of these faces is represented in that T. Why did I do that? I don't want to do that. There you go. Right? So there's this face where it's there. Now notice this is a square, this is a rectangle. So it's not super accurate to matching everything up. We want to change that. The quickest way to get a simple set of UV shells that correlate better to how this looks is to do what's called automatic mapping. So we're going to go up here to Create, Automatic Mapping Options, and we're going to choose Less Distortion and 3 planes. And when we hit Apply, now we can play with these options later when we get to our character, but I'll hit Apply, and you'll notice now this looks like a more accurate reflection of each box. I'm going to close this out. However, we could make this better. We would like to have as many things stuck together as possible and be really efficient with this space. So the front of the box, this is going to be the front. I know because the z-axis is pointing out from it instead of pointing through it. So I'm declaring this is the front. And what I'm going to want to do is I want to attach these guys so they correspond to, I want to attach them so that this looks like they're connected, right? So here's how you do that. You're going to go to Edge, and notice I have one edge on my XYZ area, my object, but I have 2 edges in my UV world. And you can actually have multiple edges, shared edges, or shared UVs here in the UV world. So I've selected this edge, and you notice it has an edge in common with this space here. I want to connect that. The quickest way to do that is to go here to where it says Cut and Sew and choose Move and Sew. Bam. And it spun the thing around and attached it right there. So I'm just going to select every edge and go to Cut and Sew, Move and Sew. G repeats my last action, so I don't even have to hit Move and Sew. I'm just going to hit G, and I'm going to hit this side and hit G. And now I have a nice, good UV shell for the front of my box. Now, one thing in UV mapping is you don't want these overlapping. If I were to keep the back of this shell right here, that would make the front side, whatever I put on the front would look exactly the same as the back. And as we all know, cereal boxes don't work like that. They have other weird stuff on the back, little puzzles and games for you to look at. So we could try to squeeze this in and shrink this, but I want to keep this the whole size. So what I could do is I could rotate this. I can hit E, just like I would over here, to rotate it. Or if I wanted to rotate it precisely, I could go to Modify and choose Rotate. And it rotates it 90 degrees. And I could go to the options and make it like 45 degrees. And you'll notice it's still not quite fitting. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to shrink both of these just a little bit. So I'm going to hit R, shrink that one, but not too much. Just enough so that they both can fit on my UV shell space. There we go. That is a solid UV map for a cereal box, right? You could do more things and attach, but that's it. This is what I want you to do. All right. Now we got to ship this out so we can play with it in Photoshop, and we need these lines as a guideline. So this is called a UV snapshot. That's UV snapshot. And to go, you hit here to Image, and you select UV snapshot. Make sure that your object is selected in object mode. Image, UV snapshot. Couple of settings here. Let me reset them. There you go. First thing you want to change is your image format to JPEG. Photoshop won't read a Maya IFF file. Maya IFF file is an image format file for Maya. And then size X and Y, 2048 is great. If you really wanted to bump it up to 4K, it might slow your machine down a little bit, but you can try. But 2048 is just what we want to work with. All right, make sure you say where to save it. So I'm going to go to Browse, I'm going to go to my messy desktop, and I'm going to call it, since we're in a class 1 _ UV snap cereal box. Okay, last name. And sometimes I make you turn that in, sometimes I don't. Depends on the class. So if you're watching this 3 years from now, I might have you record it in, I might not. So definitely ask me. All right, we're going to go away from Maya here, and we're going to go into Photoshop. And what I can actually do is I can actually go to my UV map here, and it looks like you can see the lines. They're all there. So right click, and I'm going to choose Open with Photoshop. And it's going to start a new project with the dimensions of my snapshot. Now, if you know Photoshop, this is going to be a really easy demo. And if you really know Photoshop, you might be asking, like, why is Mr. G showing us how to do it this way? It's because I'm trying to go as simple and as fast in Photoshop as possible. And some of the stuff I'm training you for your character model, which will be the next project. So some of the steps that seem obvious and simple here will be way more useful for the next more complex UV map here. All right. Just a quick introduction to Photoshop. So first of all, this is your main image. Over here on the right, these are your layers. This is what's going to be most important. Okay, I'm going to be hopping back here. 9 times out of 10, when you're having an issue with Photoshop and you're not getting along, this is the problem. You probably are on the wrong layer, or a layer is locked, or something needs to be rasterized, or something like that. So I have my background layer here. I'm going to want to make a new layer. The quickest way to make a new layer is Command-Shift-N, and I can even change the name, and I'm going to call this Stencil. Did you not catch that? I'll show you other ways to make a layer. Command-Shift-N is the hotkey. Command-Shift-N is the hotkey to make a new layer. Or I can go up here to Layer, New Layer, and look, it tells me Shift-Command-End. Or a lot of people are big fans of this button right here. Down here, this little page button. That will also make a layer. By the time your project's done, you're going to have tons of layers. In fact, you can even move this around and kind of reposition it. But I'm going to leave it down here because that's where most of you are going to be keeping this. Okay, so I have a background layer, and you notice I made this new layer called Stencil. Make sure you're hitting pause if you need to kind of do these steps while I'm doing it. All right, so it's really important to work on the correct layer as you're operating. So I'm going to be on the background layer. I'm going to go to my Magic Wand tool, and I know a lot of people poo-poo the Magic Wand tool. The magic to the Magic Wand tool is playing with this thing of tolerance, but we have a very simple step for the Magic Wand. I'm going to click on my background layer. I'm going to click on my Magic Wand. If you can't see the Magic Wand, it's because it's buried underneath Quick Selection, which we may get to. Now I'm going to click anywhere off of my UV shell. So this is a UV shell, that's a UV shell. I'm going to click off of it, making sure background over here is selected. You'll notice I get the ants marching around the UV shell. So what I've just done is I've selected the area that's not the UV shell. Now here's the important part. I click on my new layer. If you didn't make a new layer, remember it's Command-Shift-N, or it's this little button down here, or it's Layer, New Layer. Okay? So make sure I click on that new layer now, off of my background. All right, so everything I do, I'm going to try to make a new layer for. And I'm going to make my stencil a layer that's a color that I know I'm not going to use. So Waluigi is going to be full of purple and greens, so I can use like I can probably use like this hot pink. There you go. Because I know Waluigi is not going to have any pink in it. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the spill bucket on my blank layer to kind of create this like bright pink area. The spill bucket is underneath the gradient tool. And we're going to get to the gradient tool because it's kind of cool, right? So I'm going to go to my spill bucket, and I'm going to click anywhere in this area. And you'll notice it took the background layer, it took the selection I made from the background layer, and it allowed me to spill a bucket here. Okay, now to get rid of the ants marching, or the selection, I can hit Command D, or I can go back to my wand and I can click off of, so if I had this selected, if I just click off of the image, it goes away. Okay. Mr. G, why do we make a stencil layer? Well, if I'm using my selection tool, which we're about to do, if I wanted to get the entire front of the box, and I chose my background layer, if I click the middle, I have only selected this piece right here, and now I have to like add by holding the shift key, I can add a selection, but you notice it still kept this line, so then I have to try and gather that line. So it's just easier if you have this stencil, and I click right on the stencil, I get the entire front with all the nooks and crannies. I can even hide the background layer for right now, which I'm going to do. We're going to come back to this background layer. It's going to become important in a second. So here's what I want you to do now. We're going to make another new layer, Command-Shift-N, and we're going to call it front color. Something like that. You can do that again by clicking down here, or Command-Shift-N, whatever it is. Breakneck speed, I'm supposed to go fast. I'm going to go to my stencil layer. Make sure you're clicking on the right layer. So I'm on my stencil layer. Okay? And I'm going to go to my magic wand, and I'm going to click this center stencil, and I get the whole selection here. Okay? Now, I'm going to, instead of going to my spill bucket, I'm going to go to my gradient tool. And now I'm going to pick two colors. I'm going to pick two different kinds of purple, right? So I'm going to select my pink that was pink down here. This is where you select colors. And I'm going to choose, you know, a deep purple. Nice deep Waluigi purple. And then my background color, my secondary color, I'm going to make a light purple. I could do something more dramatic. For the sake of the demo, I'll make it green, just for a second. All right, so I was on my stencil layer. So just to kind of review, magic wand, stencil layer, click on the front zone of my UV map. Bam, you can see the ants marching. Now I'm going to move layers. I'm going to go up to my front color, click on this layer right here, my front color, and now with my gradient, I have purple and green. Where I initially, if I'm on my gradient tool, where I initially click with my left, that'll be purple. Where I release will be my green. So I'm going to go left click and release. And you can see if I wanted a smaller gradient, I can make a smaller shift. If I can make it any direction. It's wherever I left click, it's going to be purple. Where I release will be green, and it's going to fade in between. You may have noticed I was playing, I switched over here because there's other options you can do. If I wanted to do like a spiral or a swirl, right? If I wanted it to be the opposite way, I can swap. So if I wanted green in the center and purple on the edges, I can swap, right? There's other options here for you to play with. You can do a band. So I'm going to go back to that light purple and do a purple spiral in the center, like kind of like, I'm going to swap that. Something like that. Yeah, looks good. Maybe a little bit more. Oh, too much. Yeah, There you go. So that's my front color. Other things I should do is I should probably make a back color since I'm here and since I'm doing that. So I'm going to go stencil here. I'm going to click on my back, make a new layer, call it back color, hit OK. And now I have a back color here. And the back color, maybe I'll go to my gradient again, but I'll switch it. I'll do one of these, like a color band. And I'll kind of see how it has that diagonal line. Maybe I want to make it, let's swap it. There you go. Maybe a little off center. Yeah, like that. Perfect. Okay. So now we got our colors set. Perfect. I'm going to hit Command E to get rid of my selection. And now the fun begins. So you're going to go to the internet, like a Google image search or something, and you're going to find some pictures. So I found some pictures, just some simple pictures of Waluigi. And I'll do this one first, because this one's going to be really easy to crop. And so I'm going to drag Waluigi from here. So notice, once I get my pictures from the internet, just download them off of Google, I can literally just drag and drop them in here. And some of you might be noticing, Mr. G, it's hidden under my layers. Well, this is an important part. So I'm going to notice it gives me a wireframe. This wireframe lets me kind of resize it and get it just right. So I'm going to go here and hit enter. You'll be like, Mr. G, I can't see my image. Well, that's because I had this back color selected, so it put my image above that one layer. But you'll notice the front color here. So let's talk about layers for a second. Whatever's on top of my layer window is going to be on top of whatever's below it. So that's why I can't see it, because my color's over it. So what I can do is I can take my image here and I can plop it on top. And now you'll see I have a Waluigi up here. There's going to be a few more things to play with, but let's talk about, hey, Mr. G, we made this. Let me hide everything else so you can hide things. We have these reference guides, and I want Waluigi to come right here on that box. How do I make that happen? How can I see that line with all this other junk? That's a great question. So what I want to do is I want to duplicate this background, right-click, duplicate that layer, and you can do that with everything else. And I'm going to call this one the overlay layer, right? Or I can call it the UV guide. I actually don't want to call it overlay because that might get confusing. Boop, hit OK. So I've duplicated my background. I'm still going to get rid of my background layer just in case, or hide it just as a reference. And I'm going to plop my UV guide up to the top. Well, that doesn't do any good. Okay. So with my UV guide selected, right above it, I have this thing here that says normal. Well, I can change that to screen. And what screen does is everything that's white will still be opaque. Everything that's black will be transparent. Everything that's gray will be half transparent. But guess what? We have no gray. So if I hit screen, I can now see the white lines from the UV snapshot over it. So I've made my Luigi too big, which is great because I want to talk about the next thing, is how do you resize things? So this tool right here looks like a little crosshair. That's kind of like my move tool. You want to make sure you're on the right layer. And sometimes you need to hide or lock a layer. So I'm just going to hide this layer for a second. So here's my Waluigi. It's too big for my UV snapshot. So what I'm going to do is I need to kind of shrink him back down. Just remember in Maya, right, moving is called transform. So just remember transform, Command T for transform. This is called our free transform tool. It's also under edit, and it's right here, free transform, Command T. And that gives you that wireframe that we originally had when we put our image in. So I can shrink it back down, and so that'll fit on the box like so. And now I can just double check. I got my guidelines. We're all good. I'm going to turn that off again. All right. So when you have an image like this, you need to do a couple things. Notice I have this little image icon here. This means it's kind of what's called a smart object, and you can't do a lot of modifications to it. So we're going to have to do a thing called rasterize. Let me show you what I'm talking about. We want to get Luigi's, all the white stuff here, we want to get rid of it, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to go back to our magic wand, and this is where the magic wand becomes magic. It's playing with the tolerance. So if you notice, like if I'm clicking, I'm going to raise it to like a really high tolerance, 40. And if I'm clicking here, you'll notice it selected a lot of stuff, right? It selected the glove, it selected stuff that I don't want to get rid of, right? So if I make that tolerance back down to 12 and do another selection, now it didn't select the glove, it didn't select his teeth. It was pretty good. All right, but if I try to delete this by pressing the delete key, it says, hey, you can't do it, your object is not directly editable. So I want to right-click and choose the word rasterize. Just remember the word rasterize. What this does is it takes away the smart object feature and makes it a raster. It makes it a raster image. If you don't know what that is, don't worry about it. Just remember that word rasterize. Just something you got to memorize. Now that object thing, that little smart object icon is gone, and now when I press delete, now it makes stuff transparent. Now I missed a few white spots, so I'm going to grab between the two arms. There's this little bitty spot right here, which if I held the Option key while using the wheel, I can zoom in. Now I can hit delete. All right, that's how you add objects. So one more thing to do. This can get very complicated very fast. So one other way to select an object would be, that was a very easy object with a white background. If you get lucky, sometimes you can get something off the internet with a transparent background. So if you're not confident in your Photoshop skills, do your Google images for transparent backgrounds and make sure they're PNG files or some sort of file that's other than JPEG that actually has a transparent background, and you don't even have to do what I just did, right? So if you Google image something and it has a transparent background, you don't have to do any of the things I just demonstrated, right? And you have that. Okay. If you really like this image, right? Get that a little bit bigger. If you have something like this and you want to make that for the back, right? So I'm going to zoom in a little bit here, holding Alt, and the spacebar lets me kind of click around it. This is going to be a very challenging thing because everything's different. The wand tool is not going to work, right? So there's other tools here like lasso or magnetic lasso that will, when I click on it, it'll let me kind of trace what I want to select. And I'm not going to walk you through this whole thing, but notice it's selecting everything. When I'm done, so it kind of sticks to Luigi. And I'm going to do a really bad job right now, okay, just to have it complete. I would go a little slower, but notice it's kind of detecting the edges as long as I'm tracing it. If I can click on it and make an anchor point, and again, I'm doing sloppy for the sake of time, but it's actually doing better than I thought it would at that speed. So I got a few pieces here with the quick selection tool holding Alt subtracts, so I can kind of get rid of a few of those selections. And again, going fast, oop, too fast. And I'm going to go slot, so I'm not going to have it perfect here. Burp. Okay, that's enough. And then again, I have that rasterized image icon. So I have to right-click, choose rasterize. And now when I hit delete, oops, I selected the image, right? So what I want to do is I want to actually delete the rest of it. I can do one of two things. I can either hit copy, Command-C, and then paste. And what that did was it took the selection and pasted it. See how that's horrible? You're going to take more time. Or I could right-click and choose Select Inverse and then press Delete. Right? Now, if I did a bad selection, I can hit Command-D. There's another tool here called the Eraser, which does exactly what you think. It erases stuff. So I could just kind of go through at my selection afterwards, just kind of clean it up. Now, I'm doing a really bad job because I'm going really, really fast. I would usually take my time, but I ain't got that kind of time. The other thing to remember is, going back to my other thing, we rotated this box so that the top edge, oops, we should rotate it the other way. UV shell, I'm going to rotate it. Modify 1, and one more time 2, so that the top edge is here, right? So we need to rotate Waluigi, Command-T, like so. So just remember that. If I hold down the Shift key, it locks to every 15 degrees. So once again, that was Command-T. To rotate, I hold it outside. Okay, once again, going super fast. Hit Enter when you're done. Make sure you hit Enter when you're done for Command-T. So that's how you add pictures. So what I'm going to want is I want pictures on every single panel. You can have the same pictures. You can copy and paste. You can duplicate layers by right-click, duplicate layer, which is right there. So now I got a layer on top of a layer. And I can just move that over, move tool on the right layer. There you go. Somehow I accidentally grabbed undo, go away. I forgot to do one thing, that's fine. All right. So you can just kind of duplicate layers and you can have each piece there. Okay. Now let's talk about text. So we figured out images, play with images. You figured out colors, play with colors. The last thing you should do is, let me just undo that. There you go. Is text. So let's do some text here. So I want to have some titles and all that stuff. So text is this T. I click on the T, and notice you should be detecting a pattern here. I have options that come up here. Every time I select a new tool, right, with my magic wand, it was tolerance, right? When I get to my text, I have all these different font options. So these are the options. This is the top bar here is the options for whatever tool I'm selecting on my left. So I'm going to do something like grab my text. I'll find a text I want. I want Rockwell. Rockwell, Rockwell. Oops. Rockwell, Rockwell. LMNOP, There it is. Boop. Rockwell. And I want my font to be white and regular. I'm going to make my font pretty big, and then I can change it later with Command T as well. I'm just going to click right here, and I'm going to type Luigi O's. Yeah, right? Now that's Rockwell regular. I want to kind of change my mind. I'm going to hit Command A, and I'm going to choose bold. And it's still looking okay, right? But let's add some pizzazz here. So if I wanted to make it bigger, I'm going to hit Command T, and I can shape it just like I did with my pictures, my images. It's getting better, but there's more that we can do. So if I go back to my text and I select it, I can make it 3D, which takes a lot of render processor power, but I can also just kind of give it some shake. So I can give it an arc, right? Something like that. And that's a pretty steep arc. So I'm going to kind of bend it down, hit OK, and then kind of put it now. Now it's looking better. Now I can even do more, right? So that looks good, but let's make it look better. So there's another thing you can do with both image, anything on a layer, you can do all these things I'm about to show you. So I want to give it an outline and a drop shadow and some other effects here. So if I right click on this and choose blending options, I get a whole bunch of stuff here. So let's start with an outline. Adobe likes to call outline stroke. So if I click on stroke, it checks it on. It gives me a color. I could make this a different color, but the black outline's looking good. I could probably make it a little thicker. There you go. And that's actually looking kind of nice. Beveling makes stuff look like it's a three-dimensional text that's popping out. And again, I could make it look larger or smaller. Now it's really looking 3D. Another thing I can do is drop shadow. So there's a whole bunch of stuff here for you to play. That's a pretty big distance. Not sure what I was doing. And I can change the angle of my drop shadow. Maybe right there. Maybe a little closer. And then it's a little blurry. So I'm gonna, make it look a little less blurry. Maybe a little more transparent. There you go. So all sorts of fun settings for you to play with. But that's really popping now. I could do that with Waluigi here, right? I could, wait, which one? This one, right? I could do the same stuff with him. I could give him a layer, blending options. I could give him an outline, right? You can see some of my selection issues. Or I can give him a drop shadow to kind of make him pop off the page. So there's all these fun things I can do. I don't want to do that, though. All right, so what you're going to do is you need to do, these are the tools that you have. A couple other things, if you really wanted to, there's shapes. So down here, there's rectangles. Again, I have a white rectangle with a black box. That'll give me something like that. Oops, I have dotted lines for an outline. I can give it a straight out. I can do, I can do all sorts of shapes and play with that. Another fun tool to play with is brush. Right? Oops, sorry. This is brush. I'm on brush. Make a new layer. Right? So you can make shapes. You can brush stuff. I'd have to change my color, right? Maybe get red. I can paint. If I want to change my brush size, I can go, where's my brush size? Right here. can make it much bigger. I can change it to other patterns and brushes. That's obviously not good, but you get the idea. Get rid of that shape too. So what you need to do is text, images, color, and any other fun tools you want to explore, but that's what you're going to need. So with what I've just shown you, you can do lots of color, 3 different images, and at least 1 image on each side, text on each side, and has some sort of focus or theme here. That's what I want you to do. When you're done, you're going to get something that looks something like this. Yes. Nope. This. There. Okay. This would be like a finished product, right? So I have an image on each side of the box, right? It's all nicely formatted and fitting. I have text on each side of the box, right? And I've clearly have a theme going, and it looks fun. And then here's how you get it back onto your cereal box. The last step. You want to make sure you save your file here. So I'm going to hit Command, say, let's do Command-Shift-S. Okay, make sure it's a PSD file. I'm going to call it, C Box Demo 1. Very exciting title there, right? Now I'm going to go back to my Maya file. Oh, I forgot something. Make sure this top UV shell that you're using as your guidelines, make sure you turn that off. Make sure you at least hide it. You do that by clicking the eyeball, right? I'm going to hit save. Make sure you hit save after you hit that eyeball. Because if you don't, what's going to happen is I'm going to see those lines. And we don't want to see those lines. Now go back to that Maya file. And in object mode, we're going to go add a Lambert or a Phong. So if you wanted to make it like shiny plastic Phong, regular non-shiny plastic Lambert, right-click, assign favorite material Lambert. Boom. Now instead of choosing color, like you've done before, choose the checkerboard box. Okay? And click the checkerboard box. I'm going to choose PSD file. Bam. Nothing happened yet because I have to go to the file directory path. So when you see this folder, this is kind of like the sign for a directory path. So I'm going to click on that folder. I'm going to go to my desktop. I'm going to find Waluigi. And I'm going to go CBox Demo 1. That was my finished product. Hit open. And it looks like nothing happened. When I click on my box here, oh, I can see it here, but I still can't see it here. Well, guess what? You have to do one more thing, which is activating the UV color preview, which is 6. Now, you'll notice there's a problem. The problem is this Photoshop file that is this one. I used a slightly different UV map than the one I just created with you guys. Everything's slightly off. What I could do now is notice if I can just slide this over, you can see how my UV map correlates to my location here. So it looks like I made my panels a little bit bigger, so maybe I need to kind of grow this a little bit. And now this is why you made the stencil a very, very bright color, right? So now I can find a mistake. There's a mistake down there with the bright blue. So what I'm going to need to do here is kind of readjust it. Or, let me show you how to readjust it, right? So if you notice there's a different thing, it's because you either use a different pattern. It's because I didn't use this cereal box. Oops, sorry. This cereal box. This one, notice it's a slightly different size, right? So when I was doing my other example, it was slightly different. Okay. So a quick fix would be, instead of going to UV, I'm going to go to UV. I'm going to grab all of these top UVs here. I'm going to pull it down and until I don't see any blue leaking through. And that's why we made the stencil a bright color, so you can easily detect the issue. Again, here, I'll pull this up until, oops, I accidentally grabbed one from, there you go. Now I pull this up. Now that's looking pretty well aligned. And again, these two right here, pull them up. And then it looks like I might need to grab these 4. So just resize. Notice I'm grabbing all the ones that are involved with the line to try and keep them consistent. Get rid of that guy. And then there. And now it's looking a lot better. And then just got to fix the bottom panel. I'm going to go to shell, scale it down a little bit. And notice if my UV is like not covering the whole ground, that's fine. You can. It's not kindergarten. You can actually color outside the lines here. And now my box looks pretty good. Just do one more double check before I go. I overlapped it a little there, but that's okay. So now when you turn in, just going to spin it. Command S, go over here, 120, spin it twice. All right, was that 1, 2, and hit save. Let's see. Make sure you click off your box so you don't see the green lines, and you're going to play blast, which you know how to do. But play, just to remind you, right-click, play blast options, and go ahead and choose your browse, choose your desktop, find your folder. You're going to call this 1_UV box _ last name, and save and play blast, and that's what you're going to submit. Please drop that off in the submit folder. All right, that was my fast, kind of fast, not really fast demo on how to do the UV box, and I didn't show you everything with Photoshop, but I showed you everything you need to kind of survive with our Photoshop. All right, hope you're warm and well fed. Don't forget to slap that like button.